What if I told you the most important thing a Viking carried wasn't an axe, but a set of scales? That the most terrifying sound wasn't a battle cry, but the clinking of silver coins from Baghdad in a leather pouch? The image of the horned helmet warrior, a fiction by the way, crashing ashore to burn and plunder is powerful, but it's only a sliver of a much bigger, more complex, and frankly more important story. Welcome to 10-Minute History. I'm your host, Jake Sullivan, and today we're throwing out the stereotypes to uncover the real engine of the Viking Age trade. These weren't just raiders. They were the master merchants of their time, the creators of a vast commercial empire that stretched from North America to Central Asia, connecting worlds that had never been connected before. This is the story of how a people from the frozen north became the global economy's most crucial middlemen. So how did a society of farmers and fishermen from Scandinavia suddenly rewire the world? It was a perfect storm of technology, opportunity, and need. First, they perfected the ultimate tool, the Viking ship. You have the famous longship, a masterpiece of naval engineering. It was strong yet flexible, able to ride the waves of the open Atlantic. But its true genius was its shallow draft. It could sail in just 3 feet of water, meaning Vikings could attack anywhere along a coastline, sail hundreds of miles upriver, and appear as if from nowhere. But for our story, the real hero is the longship's less glamorous cousin, the knarr. This was the cargo ship, the workhorse of the Viking Age. It was wider, deeper, and slower, designed to carry up to 30 tons of goods. The knarr is the single best piece of evidence that trade wasn't just a side hustle for the Vikings, it was a planned, central part of their world. The second catalyst was economic. In the 8th century, Western Europe was experiencing a silver famine. Old mines were depleted, and the flow of silver coins dried up. For a society that was increasingly using silver as a measure of wealth, this was a crisis. This hunger for silver was a powerful motivator, first for raids on treasure-filled monasteries, but more importantly, it pushed the Vikings to look for new sources of wealth. And they knew exactly where to look, east, towards the glittering, silver-rich Islamic world. At the heart of this entire system were Scandinavia's first true cities, the great trading hubs of Hedeby and Birka. Think of them as the international airports and Amazon warehouses of the 9th century. Hedeby in modern-day Denmark was the gateway between the Baltic and the North Sea. It was a massive, planned city, protected by a giant earthen wall. Archaeologists there have found goods from all over the known world: French wine jugs, Irish jewelry, Norwegian soapstone, and most importantly, silks from Constantinople, and thousands upon thousands of silver coins from the Arab caliphates. Its counterpart, Birka, on an island in a Swedish lake, was the departure point for the legendary eastern routes. The graves at Birka tell the story of its incredible reach. One woman was buried with a silver ring, inscribed in Arabic script with the words for Allah. Another grave contained fragments of Chinese silk. And in perhaps the most stunning find of all, archaeologists unearthed a small, 6th century bronze statue of the Buddha made in Kashmir, in what is now Pakistan. Somehow, this tiny object traveled 6,000 kilometers, passing through the Silk Road, the markets of Persia, and the hands of a Varangian trader to end its journey in the grave of a Viking woman on a small island in Sweden. If one object can tell the story of this interconnected world, it's that one. From these hubs, the Viking trade network split into 2 great highways, the western routes and the eastern routes. The western routes crossed the North Sea, connecting Scandinavia with the British Isles and the vast North Atlantic. In England, after decades of raiding, the Vikings conquered a huge territory known as the Danelaw. Here, they transformed the old Roman town of York into a bustling metropolis they called a Jorvik. Excavations have revealed a city of intense craft production, with workshops churning out everything from combs to shoes on a near-industrial scale. And like Hedeby, Jorvik was an international hub. Finds include amber from the Baltic, silk from the east, and even a single cowrie shell from the Red Sea or Indian Ocean, a tiny testament to a truly epic journey. In Ireland, the Vikings founded the island's first true cities, including Waterford, Limerick, and most importantly, Dublin, or Dyflin as they called it. Dublin became the center of a powerful and independent Viking kingdom, whose economy was built on a brutal but fantastically profitable commodity, slaves. The Vikings in Ireland became the primary suppliers of human captives, called thralls, to the entire Viking world, raiding the Irish interior and shipping people to markets in Iceland and even, via the eastern routes, to the Middle East. But the Vikings' western expansion didn't stop there. Driven by a hunger for land, Norwegian explorers pushed out into the unknown Atlantic. Around the year 874, they settled the uninhabited island of Iceland, creating an entirely new society from scratch. Trade was their lifeline, as they exported wool and falcons in exchange for the timber and grain they couldn't produce themselves. From Iceland, the famous Eric the Red, exiled for manslaughter, led settlers even further west to a land he cleverly named Greenland. The Greenland colony survived for centuries on a niche trade of high-value Arctic goods. Their main export was walrus ivory, a substitute for elephant ivory, which was used to carve luxury goods like the famous Louis chessmen. At around the year 1000, Eric's own son, Leif Erikson, sailed from Greenland and landed in North America, a place he called Vinland. Archaeology confirms their presence at a site called L'Anse aux Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada. It was a small base camp, likely for gathering timber, but it represents the ultimate reach of the Viking network. They were the first Europeans to reach the Americas, nearly 500 years before Columbus, a fact driven not by royal decree, but by the relentless commercial and exploratory spirit of the Viking Age. But as incredible as the Western routes were, the real money, the river of silver that transformed Scandinavia, came from the east. Swedish Vikings, known as the Varangians or the Rus, undertook one of the most arduous commercial journeys in history. They sailed from Birka across the Baltic into the rivers of modern-day Russia. Using the incredible shallow draft of their ships, they navigated hundreds of miles inland. When they reached the end of a river, they would empty their ships and drag them overland on rollers for miles through dense forest to reach the next river system. This allowed them to access two great river highways, the Dnieper, which flowed south to the Black Sea, and the magnificent city of Constantinople, which the Vikings called Miklagard, the Great City, and the Volga River, which flowed to the Caspian Sea and the heart of the Islamic Caliphate. Their business model was simple and brilliant. They established themselves as the rulers of the local Slavic tribes, demanding tribute. This tribute came in two forms: furs and slaves. The cold northern forests produced the world's most luxurious furs, sable, ermine, and black fox, which were worth a fortune in the wealthy courts of Byzantium and Baghdad. And just as in Dublin, they conducted a massive slave trade, capturing Slavic people and selling them in the markets of the East. To get a sense of what these Rus traders were like, we have the stunning eyewitness account of an Arab diplomat named Ibn Fadlan, who met them on the Volga River in the year 921. He was impressed by their perfect physiques, calling them tall as date palms, but was utterly horrified by their hygiene, famously writing, "They are the filthiest of God's creatures." He describes in graphic detail how they would all wash their faces and spit into the same single bowl of water each morning. His account is a priceless, unvarnished look at the raw, brutal, and profoundly alien culture of these long-distance traders. In exchange for their furs and slaves, the Rus got two things: silk, the ultimate luxury fabric from Constantinople, and silver. Vast, unimaginable quantities of silver. The Islamic world minted high-purity silver coins called dirhams. Archaeologists have found over 200,000 of these coins in hoards all across Scandinavia and the Baltic. The Vikings didn't use them as money in the way we do. They valued the silver for its weight and purity. They would test the coins by bending and nicking them, and then chop them into smaller pieces. This hack silver was weighed on small, portable scales to make payments. This flood of Eastern silver created a bullion economy, revolutionizing Scandinavian society and paving the way for their own national kingdoms. So what was the long-term impact of all this? It was nothing short of world-changing. The wealth from trade fueled the rise of the first real cities in Scandinavia and Ireland. It also fueled the creation of nations. Kings who controlled the trade routes grew rich and powerful, allowing them to consolidate their rule and forge the kingdoms of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. And in the east, the Varangian Rus didn't just trade, they built a state. They established a dynasty, the Rurikids, that would rule for over 700 years. They founded a capital, Kiev, and created a vast territory that is the direct ancestor of 3 modern nations, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. The very name Russia comes from the name of these Viking traders, the Rus. The Vikings, so often cast as the destroyers of civilizations, were in fact the founders of one of the most enduring in European history. Ultimately, the greatest legacy of the Viking trade network was connection. For 300 years, they created a northern axis of communication that linked continents. They broke down regional isolation, stimulated economies, and wove the disparate threads of the post-Roman world into a new, more complex, and more connected tapestry. They were the original globalists, driven by a thirst for silver and a spirit of adventure, and in the process, they didn't just visit the world, they remade it. So, what are your thoughts on this? It's a very different picture of the Vikings than we usually see. Let us know down in the comments below. If you found this interesting or learned something new, please give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to 10-Minute History for more deep dives. Thanks for listening.